let's get started talking about hyper-independence and specifically how this links to having had emotionally immature parents. So when we talk about hyper-independence, really what we're describing is not being able to trust people and therefore creating a life that is very much dependent on you and you alone. And independence generally is not necessarily a bad trait, but hyper-independence can lead to things like burnout, feeling really resentful that you're doing everything, and really lacking in emotional intimacy. So you may well have relationships, you might have a partner, friends, colleagues, but ultimately if you're not able to lean on them at all and you don't feel able to really be vulnerable with those people, then it's going to lead to a lack of emotional intimacy. And what that can do is leave us feeling quite empty and leave us feeling quite alone. So let's think about where hyper-independence tends to come from. I'm a psychotherapist, by the way. I'm also somebody who tends to lean towards hyper-independence. So I get it. I'm right there with you. I understand also how empowering it can feel and how it can be a really useful skill in some ways, but it's about when the balance tips and we're kind of cutting people off and not able, or emotionally and in terms of kind of vulnerability, we're cutting people off because we're just not able to share ourselves fully with people, then it can become counterproductive. So let's think about how this links to emotionally immature parenting. If you had parents who were not able to manage or cope with or hold your emotions, this can be a real trigger for becoming hyper-independent, because ultimately you would have had many experiences as a child in which you trusted your parent or parents, and you maybe went to them feeling vulnerable, feeling sad, maybe feeling angry, feeling scared. And if instead of getting some kind of nurturing response or something that helped you feel seen and understood and heard, if instead you got a response which left you feeling rejected or misunderstood, then that's going to, each time that happens, that's going to shut you down a little bit, right? That's going to damage your sense of other people being trustworthy and of you being able to go to other people and for them to be reliable. So that is one dynamic that can lead to hyper-independence. Another is when your needs, especially, now you may not even know if this was the case or not, but especially when you were a baby, an infant, or toddler, if your needs were just shut down or ignored completely. So when you cried, your parents ignored you, maybe left you crying through the night or any time of day, and that consistently happened, then again, you're going to have had that dynamic, even though it's before you were verbal, before you could think. Your nervous system and your body is still going to have had that experience of calling out for help and it not coming. And that again can lead to this shutting down and not trusting. Also, if you grew up in an environment in which your parents were not able to keep things running and keep things ticking over in a kind of reasonable, relatively consistent kind of way, maybe they were chaotic themselves, maybe they were struggling with addiction issues, maybe they were very preoccupied in other ways, maybe they were constantly always at work and not really available to you when they weren't at work, for example, or maybe they just kind of really were not able to be there for you in the way that you really needed as a child. And none of this is blaming them. We know they would have had their own issues, their own things going on, their own realities to manage and cope with, but nonetheless, if you were left not getting the contact that you needed ultimately and not feeling as if somebody else is kind of running the ship and you can relax, if you didn't have that experience as a child, then it makes sense that now as an adult you may have recreated that you maybe have recreated a life in which nobody else is able to kind of keep things running and moving and ticking along. Maybe you've chosen a partner who really isn't competent in that kind of way, and so it's all left to you. Or maybe that's kind of the dynamic that has unfolded with some of your colleagues, for example, or some of your friends, or your family of origin still, that you're the one kind of in charge and in control. And again, this is all related to this hyper independence. So let's think about how you can soften this, because I think it's unrealistic that you're suddenly going to kind of completely abandon this coping strategy, which is really what it is. It can feel as if this is who we are, and sometimes we talk about kind of that type A personality, or we get a bit confused with how much of how we operate in the world is really linked to coping strategies from childhood. And so it's unrealistic that you're probably going to just let go of this completely. And I imagine you've probably got a life that wouldn't practically allow for that anyway. And as I said earlier in the video, there's really nothing fundamentally wrong with being independent and with being able to kind of be in charge of things and manage things well within yourself, and to maybe be quite a productive person. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, but what we do need to think about is how it's affecting you negatively. Do you feel burnt out? Do you get to kind of go in cycles whereby everything feels fine, and then at some point it feels like out of nowhere it feels overwhelming, it feels like you're doing too much, it feels like you're unsupported, it feels like you don't get enough help in certain areas, or in every area perhaps of your life. And so really it's just about doing a bit of a cost benefit analysis of it, essentially. So you thinking about how is this showing up in your life in a way that is not helpful to you, short term or long term. Because also it's about kind of thinking about sustainability. Sometimes hyper-independence is fine when you're maybe in your mid-20s, maybe that feels still sustainable, but then maybe 20, 30, 40 years later, it's really not sustainable, and it's instead creating deep exhaustion. So if you kind of recognize the ways in which this is maybe not working that brilliantly for you, then you can start making small tweaks. And it doesn't need to be, as I said, this doesn't need to be that you suddenly are relying on everybody else and you're not doing anything at all for yourself. But you might experience periods of that where, sometimes we can kind of, when we get burnt out, you kind of go into those slumps whereby it's really difficult to do anything for yourself. So we're wanting to kind of aim for somewhere in the middle, right, in which you are absolutely still in charge of yourself and your life as best as you can be. And in charge is different to in control. We can never really be in control, but we can be in charge. We can kind of make decisions. We can't control the outcome of things, but we can make decisions and forge forward and kind of do things in a way that feels congruent and authentic for us. So you can still do that, but I wonder if there's any way or any space anywhere that you might be able to also invite a little bit more support, a little bit more contact in a way that feels nourishing and emotionally connecting. Is there anyone in your life, is a partner, friends, colleagues, family members, anybody who you think, yeah, I could probably be a little bit more open with them, I could probably fix things a bit less for those people, I could probably be less quick, less eager to sort their problems out for them, I could probably say here and there that I need a bit of help, put it out there. Is anybody able to give me a little bit of a hand with this activity or task, or or maybe it's just simply not doing as much, just not filling your time as much, allowing yourself to get to that place of rest a bit more often and see what that feels like, see what that brings up for you. So it's really just about kind of slowly and in small ways inviting more support, inviting more connection, inviting, or kind of rather rejecting, overwhelm and busyness. And sometimes it feels as if we can't get off the ride, right? It's like there's so much going on and it feels as if we can't really do much about it. But just ask yourself really, really honestly where you can do something about it. Is there anywhere that your maybe high standards are causing you to overschedule, to do more than you need to be doing for your children maybe, or for yourself, where are you overcommitting? Where can you just kind of loosen the reins slightly? And you're still retaining you. You're still going to retain, that part of you that is competent and capable, and that doesn't disappear. But this is just really about also inviting that part of you that is able to slow down, relax, rest, enjoy, and just getting more and more acquainted with that part of yourself that is able to receive more support and more love and more care, and just expanding that part of you. And it makes sense that feels scary and that you didn't grow up doing that or knowing that or having that really reliably available. So of course that's going to feel difficult, but you can do it. You can do it. You have that capacity to hold that extra support and love and care, and also the capacity to ask for that. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm Morgan-Crossley, I'm a therapist, and I just love talking about anything to do with emotionally immature parenting and the effects of that and childhood trauma and, helping make life better for those who didn't have a good start in life, basically. So do subscribe if this has been of any use to you, and I will keep doing these videos. Take care.